Thank you. My talk is about the red wolf, but I use the red wolf to illustrate a concept that says, yes, mitigation along major highways, busy highways, can be a priority, but it's not necessarily sufficient for conservation. I would like to acknowledge the funding received for this project from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The red wolf was mostly common in the eastern and southern United States, but through intentional killing and habitat loss, there was extreme range contraction. In 1972, the species was only present on the border between Texas and Louisiana, and after that, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service started a trapping program for a captive breeding program. In 1980, the species was declared extinct in the wild. By 1987, there were enough animals in captivity, and scouting has happened for a reintroduction site, Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge in North Carolina. The current situation is that we have about 20 red wolves in the wild there and 270 in the captive breeding program. When we look at the black line, jagged line in this graph, it shows you the growth in the population, the wild population in Alligator River and surroundings between 1987 and the early 2000s. It stabilized at about 100 individuals in the wild. Now, after 2013, there was a severe population decline, and that was associated with limitations in what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was allowed to do. Over the last years, the number of red wolves stabilized at around 20. If you look at the bars in each calendar year, it shows you the most commonly known causes of mortality. Essentially, gunshots and vehicle strikes are both similarly important, the most important causes of known mortality. And depending on how you calculate it, both are between 20 and 26% or so of all known causes of mortality. And vehicle strikes, they make up about 5 to 6% of the total population size. Now, if you want to rebound the population through reduction in unnatural mortality, then these two factors are something to look at: gunshots, vehicle strikes. Gunshots are already illegal to shoot a red wolf with a gun, but vehicle strikes is where we can make some gains. This map shows us where red wolf has been hit over the last few decades. And it's clear that in the northeast corner, Highway 64, where it cuts through Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge, that is where historically most of the collisions have occurred. But it's also true that there are many other hotspots on lower volume roads in the wider area over the last few decades. And what I want to focus on in my talk is the difference between a traditional approach, where you might want to only mitigate the busiest highways, versus a conservation approach, where you might have to look at the broader landscape, including low volume roads. Now here we plotted the traffic volume, annual average daily traffic volume. So these numbers represent how many vehicles a day travel each road section. And we assigned each 1/10 of a mile road unit to the associated traffic volume. So now we knew in that area where red wolf has been present over the last few decades, how many 1/10 of a mile units there were in each traffic volume category. And on the horizontal axis, we have traffic volume categories. Now, if red wolf mortalities would be independent of traffic volume, then we would expect a ratio of 1 between observed versus expected based on the relative abundance of the individual road segments in each traffic volume category. But it is not the same observed versus expected. We have the traffic volume category 2,500 to 5,000, the high peak. We see that in that traffic volume category, we hit about 2.3 times more red wolves than would be expected if red wolf road mortality would be independent of traffic volume. On the other hand, roads under 2,500 vehicles a day, we are hitting red wolves proportional to the distance that we would mitigate. Now, for Highway 64 falls in the category 2,500 to 5,000. We're looking at 2.3 times more red wolves than we would expect. This means we can have a lot of benefit, a disproportional benefit for the road length that we mitigate. It's efficient, it's economically attractive. Now, looking at red wolf road mortality in relation to traffic volume in a different way, here we have the absolute number of red wolves killed in each traffic volume category, that's the bars, and we see that 92% of all road mortality happens in roads up to 5,000 vehicles a day. So that means that if you would only focus on the busiest highways, say over 2,500, you would only mitigate 27% or so of all historic road mortality. And if you would have a higher threshold, 5,000, you would only address 1.3%. So this graph illustrates that if you want to substantially reduce road mortality and then have the population rebound because of that, you might also have to pay attention to those lower volume roads. There's also a different way to look at roads and traffic in relation to the conservation of red wolves. In this map, we show concentrations of birth locations. So the red blobs on the map, they are concentrations of where red wolves have been born. Now, we first focus on the Northeast, Highway 64. We see that we have 4 hotspots of birth locations south of Highway 64, but none on the north side of that highway. So whereas road mortality mitigation is very important along 64, if we would provide connectivity to the area on the north side, we would not be connecting high quality habitat, at least not as indicated through birth locations. On the other hand, if we look at the major north-south corridor in the area, Highway 94, then we see 7 hotspots on the west side, 2 in the northeast, and 4 in the southeast and east. So that is where we would potentially connect high quality habitat for red wolves, at least as indicated through historic birth locations. And we're still looking at birth locations here, but now we basically search for each 1/10 of a mile road unit. How many birth locations do we have in a radius up to 1,000 meters from that road section? And there's 4 concentrations that start in the northeast, Highway 64 and 264. This is the Milltail area. This is where we have the current breeding pair. And this is where you could protect the breeding individuals and their offspring from road mortality. And if they live, they can help the population grow, and juveniles can disperse and recolonize the areas further away. So that's an important benefit of mitigating where the breeding red wolves are, including historic pairs in this area. Now note that the other circles have traffic volumes that are way lower than the 4,000 associated with US 64. It is a few hundred up to 1,000, and also just a few dozen vehicles a day. So you can have birth locations and hotspots for collisions with very low traffic volume. Now, to summarize Highway 64 mitigation, we have severe collision hotspots based on historic data, 2.3 times as much more red wolves than we would expect if red wolf road mortality would be independent of traffic volume. That means we can efficiently address historical road mortality. It's also where the current road mortality is concentrated, and it's economically attractive to do that at that location. It also protects historic and the current breeding pair and their offspring, helping the population rebound by not having them die, the remaining individuals on the highway. On the other hand, it only addresses about 24% of all known historic road mortality, and when we mitigate Highway 64, it does not connect to high quality habitat, at least not as indicated through historic birth locations. Nonetheless, it is clear that Highway 64 is the priority for road mortality mitigation. That is absolutely where we would have the greatest conservation benefits on the short term. Now, what about the other roads, mostly low volume roads under 2,500? This is where most road mortality in the history of the last few decades has happened, 73%. We have severe collision hotspots along these low volume roads. We know that if we mitigate those roads in select places, we would protect historic breeding pairs and their offspring. We would also connect historic birth locations, indicating we would be connecting high quality habitat. On the other hand, if we mitigate these low volume roads, it's only proportional to the distance that we mitigate, meaning the benefit in terms of reduced road mortality, whereas Highway 64 has a disproportionate positive return. And it's also true that these low volume roads, it's not where the remaining red wolves, breeding red wolves, are right now. So in summary, these other roads in the area, they are important for mitigation, but only once the population starts to grow again, only after we have protected the remaining ones in Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge, close to Highway 64. What do these mitigation measures look like? We first made a species list, large mammal species that are present in the area or potentially present in the area, including red wolf, and what they would need. If we then want to keep all of these large mammal species out of the fenced road corridor, a fence would likely need to be metal post, chain link fence, pretty tall and an overhang. We also looked at what these same species would need for wildlife crossing structures, the type, the dimension. And we basically get to open span bridges and wildlife overpasses. It's a very flat landscape, high water table. It seems that open span bridges, such as the one shown in the upper right, might be the best way to go, where you put the road on pillars for a while. Now, there are many roads that have canals adjacent to them, running parallel, so we might also have to have crossing structures across the canals on the approaches of the crossing structures, similar to the ones that were built for the Florida panther in South Florida. If you're interested in red wolf conservation and the implementation of mitigation measures and how the thinking and strategizing has changed over the years, I encourage you to attend Travis Wilson's talk tomorrow morning. And with that, I thank you, and I also thank all the individuals who have contributed to this project.